Anything we need to talk? You want to talk politics for a while?
Oh my God.
John Siracusa, tell me about your 4K display or displays, if you please.
Yeah, this is not really related to the Mac Pro and Apple's getting out of the display business and all that business, but it's strangely connected. So I've got a PS4 Pro now, and one of the features of the PS4 Pro is that it theoretically supports 4K for games that are updated to support it and that actually do support it. And I figure since I'm keeping my old PS4 and it had a gaming monitor with it as well, I needed a new monitor for the new one because neither one of these is getting hooked up to my TV for display burn-in reasons. So when I was going to get a new monitor, I figured I should get a 4K one because, hey, the PlayStation 4 Pro is supposed to be all, 4K capable, so that's what I should do. So I shopped around for a 4K monitor that supported HDR, which is another feature of the PS4 Pro. Actually, maybe they backported that to the plain old PS4. I don't remember. Anyway, apparently it's impossible to find an HDR-capable 4K computer monitor. You can find TVs, obviously, but I wasn't looking for a TV. And also the size inflation of TVs that happened maybe 4 years ago, where any decent TV is now like at least 55 inches. Mm-hmm. I'm fearing the day that someday you won't be able to get one less than 65 inches. Like the minimum size for a decent TV has gone up.
You'll have to move.
You can't buy yourself. Can I get a 27-inch 4K TV with HDR? The answer is no. No, you can't. You want a 55-inch? Got one of those for you. Anyway, no HDR, but I did want to get 4K. So I shopped around a little bit. I hate doing this because there's like a million different products in the non-Apple world. So much selection, it's overwhelming. I ended up getting a ViewSonic, great product names, XG 2700 4K display, which is really nice. I especially like the stand it came with. It's like height adjustable. It was very sturdy. The monitor itself was a little chunky and a little bit gamery looking. Like it was black but with like a red stripe and these silly things.
My word, this is
bad.
Not only expensive, but you're whining about the LG display and the way that looks, and this has freaking red trim on it? Are you serious, John Siracusa?
Those are racing stripes that make it go faster. I mean, this is not my Mac, obviously.
Oh, wow,
Have you seen what the PlayStation 4 itself looks like?
This is hideous.
I don't care. This is truly terrible.
Anyway.
The LG Ultrafine is not a pretty monitor. I'm not trying to say it's pretty, but it's positively understated compared to this atrocity.
This is not that. I mean, if you look at it, it's basically just completely black around the display, and all you can see when you're sitting in front of it is the two little red side things on the stand, and you can't even see the red stripe on the vertical thing because it gets covered up at the height I had the monitor. Anyway, that's what I got, and it was all right. All of these PC gaming monitors have like on-screen, adjustments on the device itself that have nothing to do with the thing that's connected to it. So on the device itself, you can adjust like brightness and contrast, but also a million other settings, some of which are strange, through what you can imagine to be like the worst on-screen controls. When they put like grainy sort of bitmapped little menu thing, and normally you have like the ViewSonic has like a 1 and 2 button. Like the 1 brings up the menu, the 2 goes into it, and then there's up and down arrows.
So bad.
It's a terrible interface. It's kind of like going back in time to like when televisions first got on-screen displays. OSD, they call them, on-screen display, which doesn't really make any sense. Is that what it stands for, on-screen display? Anyway.
I believe that's right.
It doesn't make sense. Where else would the display be? Off-screen display? I know.
This is real. I'm still looking at this monitor. I mean, like, I should point out, like, I like many tastefully designed PC monitors. I like ViewSonic, and ViewSonic. I have owned multiple ViewSonic monitors. They are really good, usually. I like red, even. Red is one of my favorite colors for things to be in, even though Trump ruined red hats forever. But I look at this monitor, and I cannot even imagine buying this thing and having this on my desk.
I could not agree more.
You should look at the monitor part of it, like not the stand, but just the monitor from the front. It is literally a matte black rectangle with the word ViewSonic on the bottom. Like that's pretty much as plain as you can get.
John,
but you will see the stand, and if you're not seeing the red stripe on the back, your monitor's probably too low.
Well, I mean, I guess you can see a little tiny bit of it, but you don't notice it. And like the stand, among stands, you don't know how deep this thing goes. Go look at some of the stands of other PC and gaming monitors.
Just do me a favor. Do me a favor. Get a VESA arm and have that hold this up instead.
Yeah, no, I'm getting to that. I'm getting to the VESA arm. Okay, we'll get there.
Is it VESA? Not VESA? All these years.
I'm going to say Visa, and it's definitely a move file, and you mispronounce everything, so.
I don't understand how you besmirch the 5K monitor as an atrocity that you would never be able to use, ever, and then you buy this piece of garbage.
Do you think I would ever connect this to my Mac?
What difference does it make?
Oh, it makes a difference. I would never connect this to my Mac. It doesn't even get to be on the same desk as my Mac.
I love it. You have lower standards for the PC and gaming equipment. It's
of course
John.
I do. Of course, and not only of course I do.
I don't disagree.
But you really have no choice. Like you have to have. I have different standards anyway. But you have no choice. There is no nice, tasteful PC hardware for the most part. Even things like the HP Spectre are really. I see they're putting in an effort, but it's not to my taste. Anyway, let me continue my story here. So I got this thing, and the adjustments on it are very strange. I'm trying to get it sort of calibrated to something reasonable, but they have all sorts of settings, most of which fly in the face of my television snob sensibilities, because a television, you want to adjust, you're trying, there is a goal. There is you can get reference images and say it should look like this, because television content is produced with the expectation that here is the color range of your display, here is the brightness behavior, all sorts of other things like that. Whereas for a gaming monitor specifically, games are not produced with any sort of reference viewing environment, right? Because there is no real standard for that. Games are produced, I don't know how they decide how dark should the textures be, and what color range should we use. I really don't know what they use, but I can tell you that everybody's PC monitors are not calibrated, quote unquote, correctly, and are all over the map. And there is a setting that seems to be pervasive on all PC monitors, especially with the gaming that they call black stabilization. Have you ever even heard of that?
No.
What? Why is black changing?
Yeah. So in games, a lot of games are made where there'll be dark sections where you go in a cave or something. But if you're playing a game, especially a competitive game, you don't actually want to, quote unquote, faithfully reproduce the blacks because you won't be able to see anything. It is an advantage for you instead to have the monitor so that it kind of, I'm assuming what it's doing is squashing everything down. So I can see the subtle difference between 100% black and 99% black and 98% black in this cave. It's important for me to see that so I can pick out the edges of the cave wall and find where the enemies are or whatever. Have you ever seen anyone do competitive first-person shooters in PC gaming? They're not trying to get visual fidelity as if it's a movie or a television show. What they're trying to do is, can I see everything clearly? So a lot of the monitors have settings that make the picture worse, by reducing the dynamic range and making areas that would be black less black, which looks bad. It's like a bad black level on your TV. And also all the settings that involve response time, because that's the other big thing. A lot of gamers use TN panels, which nobody uses anymore because they look terrible. The viewing angles are terrible. But they have better response time. I've never gone that far. I couldn't get a TN display because that's it's like going back to the MacBook Air. It's no.
I mean, you aren't an animal.
Right. So I got an IPS display, which it has a 5 times worse response time. But even on these displays, there's a way you can change the response time to be as good as it can be, doing what I assume is sacrificing visual quality. I'm trying to strike the right balance between don't look terrible monitor, but also I do feel there's a benefit to not having everything be black when I'm doing the raid, one of the raids in Destiny. There are a lot of dark areas, and if I'm doing some jumping puzzle in the dark to try to do something, I do have it adjusted, quote unquote, wrong, so I can so the games play better. So anyway, I had a lot of trouble trying to get the ViewSonic set up that way, but the real problem was that for a while, my PlayStation 4 Pro did not show me the 4K output option. It would just output 1080. I'm like, well, that's not what I want. I need you to output 4K. So I did a bunch of Googling. The PlayStation says, count output 4K, and it would say HDCP 2.2 not available. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with HDCP, but it's another one of those stupid things that makes your life worse for no good reason. Mm-hmm. And this monitor apparently predates HDCP 2.2. It only supports I forget what the earlier standard is, maybe 1.1 or 1.4. I don't know. Anyway, I had a quote unquote HDMI 2.0 cable and everything was good, but it didn't work with it. And I did some Googling. You find people asking ViewSonic on Twitter, hey, does this monitor support HDCP 2.2? They say, sorry, no. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to return this thing and get a different monitor. Now, it turns out you can get it to games to display 4K on this. It has a bunch of HDMI ports in the back, and like so many televisions and monitors before, only one of the ports is like the good one. So once I move the cable to the good port, the one and only good port, which isn't labeled with anything that says, hey, this is the only one that does HDMI 2.0. Hey, this is the only one that does 4K, but it turns out there's only one that does it. So I could display games in 4K on this. But I still wanted to get another monitor because this one still doesn't support HTTP 2.2, which probably isn't a factor for playing games, but it does mean that like Netflix and other stuff like that wants to display video content won't do it on 4K because this doesn't do the stupid intellectual property copy protection dance just the right way for stupid reasons. So I returned this one in grand Marco fashion. Although this was just plain old my fault of like I didn't even think to look for HDCP 2.0. I'm like, I just need a gaming monitor. This is one of those. It has HDMI input. I should be good to go.
Wait, and by the way, I don't usually return things. Usually I sell them.
I thought about selling this because like the stupid restocking fee on this was going to be a lot of money. I'm like, well, if I can sell it for more than the restocking fee, then...
Oh, if there's a restocking fee, I'll return it for sure. It's just an issue of like I don't want to like I feel bad returning things when I know someone else is going to be eating the cost. But if I'm definitely eating the cost, then I won't feel bad about that anymore.
Yeah, I was just hoping if I sold it to someone else, it's like a brand new monitor that had like barely even touched the little plastic films were still on the thing, the peely plastic stuff that protects it. That was still on it. So this was brand new. But if I could have sold it for somebody for like maybe $80 less than I paid for it, then I still would have come out ahead. Anyway. So I returned that one, and in its place, I got an LG 4K display. I don't have an LG 5K display. I now have an LG 4K display.
Does it have that weird little head with the camera in it?
It is not a 5 head. You can take a look at it.
Wait, what model is it?
The ridiculous... I just put the link in the show notes. It is not a 5 head. It is more tame looking.
Whoa, there's no edge.
There is. It's very thin, but... so you notice this one is smaller overall. It comes in a very small box, as Casey noted. The frame around it is very small. The panel is probably the same panel that's in like every LG 27-inch 4K display that you can get right now, because they sell a whole bunch of them with different letter suffixes on them. The little stand that it's on is where the ViewSonic kicks its butt, because the ViewSonic stand was big, chunky, height adjustable,
and red
and stable, right? And this monitor, if you take your finger and put it under the corner and tap upwards, the monitor bobbles its little bobblehead like it's one of those little hula dolls that you put on a dashboard or one of those bobblehead figures, right? It is the worst design stand. It just connects with 2 screws that you screw in yourself to this little tiny, thing in the back of it. Terrible stand. It's ugly, too. I think that little semicircular thing is ugly. It takes up more room on your desk width-wise than that square thing that the ViewSonic had. No, there's no red stripe, but it doesn't perform adequately the function of keeping the monitor still. So if I bump my desk with my knee while I'm playing, I got to watch a stupid bobblehead bobble in front of me. Now, it does have a VESA mount on the back, and so I said, all right, well, whatever. Who cares about that stand? It's got, the 100mm VESA mount on the back of the thing. All I have to do is find a sturdy VESA mount, get rid of that stupid foot, and use that. But I don't want an arm, because I don't want to clamp it to my desk, because I have glass on top of my desk, and I don't want to clamp anything to it. My desk isn't that... I just don't want an arm. There's too much stuff going on back there. I just want a stand. And every single VESA stand I could find was uglier than this foot.
Yeah, you're not gonna have a good time there.
They're terrible. Like, the metal ones look like giant metal horseshoes. The plastic ones look just as bad as this. So I'm just not hitting my desk and being careful. And by the way, the on-screen controls for this one are better than the ViewSonic, but still pretty grim. This one has a tiny little joystick under the middle that you move around. It's like kind of like a 5-way switch. You get up, down, left, right, and press in. But what a terrible interface. And because it's the bottom, and you're wiggling a joystick that's like pointing down, but you're trying to move controls on the screen that are going, in a different plane, up, down, left, and right. I don't know. Anyway, I think this one looks a little bit better than the ViewSonic panel quality-wise. Or maybe it's just that I have had more time to tweak it because the adjustments are not so painful to use in the menu. But it has all the same crap, including a response time adjustment in which the value that you want is high. It's like, I don't want high response time, but yet because of the way they name these features and probably the poor translation of the options, I had to look it up in the manual and say, which one do I want for the thing where the response time number is a lower number of milliseconds? Oh, high. That makes sense.
Why would you ever want it to be slower?
I think it decreases, the quality of the display. It decreases something. I'm assuming the color quality or something like it's doing less processing on the display, and probably, it's trying to not put as much computation between the signal and the screen. Same thing with, there's like a sharpness thing that'll apply a sharpness filter, and especially when playing games in 1080, like Destiny is still just 1080. The sharpness filter does help make the text look better, but it adds processing overhead. So if you really want the best response time, I'm assuming that the best option is to turn the sharpness all the way down, which is what I've done. Anyway, I was able to adjust this to get it look a little bit better to my eyes than the ViewSonic, and now I'm just patiently waiting for 4K games to come out.
So I do not have this exact same monitor. I was mistaken for a couple different reasons. One, I'm pretty sure it's a different model. So you got the UD68-P. I got the UD58-B, and the bezel on mine is considerably larger than the bezel on yours. Also, you chose poorly if this is ever going to get connected to a computer. If you're ever going to connect it to a computer, 4K is not enough DPI for 27 inches. You should have gotten 5K.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm never connecting this to a computer. What computer would I connect this to? My gaming PC?
Well, you could connect it to your piece of garbage Mac in theory, and then actually have a Retina Mac.
No, I would. This also was never going to be connected to a Mac.
I love that all of this trouble you're going through. I mean, this is all like this crazy stuff you're going through, and having this whole separate desk setup that, of course, this won't go near your Mac and everything, and having this PC monitor, all this, and yet you won't build a gaming PC. Like, you're basically you're putting in all the effort that it would take to have a gaming PC.
No way. The PlayStation is way less effort than a gaming PC. Way less effort than a gaming PC.
I mean,
yes.
Once you get into all this crazy monitor twiddling that you're doing, I mean, really, like, you might, like, why is there not a gaming PC on this second tier desk that you have?
The gaming PC would not do. There's no Destiny for PC, although Destiny 2 may be coming for PC fans. But anyway, there's no Destiny for PC. There's no Last Guardian for PC. There's no Uncharted 4 for PC. Like, I need to have this. This is the thing that I need. The gaming PC does not replace this in any possible, especially since the only thing I do with my consoles is play like a handful of games that are essentially console exclusives. Even on my Nintendo consoles, there's no gaming PC that's going to play the next Zelda game, right? That's what I buy these things for. So I would have to have a gaming PC in addition to this, and there's no room for it, and it's way more headache than this. This is, I didn't mind the 4K thing because I was excited to get a 4K monitor and to play games at that resolution. I do have a few games that have had updates that came out, which really just makes things look a little bit sharper because it's not like they redid all the textures for the most part. I think Overwatch is 4K now. I haven't looked at that yet, but anyway, there's a bunch of games there, and I don't have the PlayStation VR yet, but I'm considering getting that. But no, I'm pretty happy with the setup. About the PS4 Pro, the only complaint I have about it, and I realize I should probably just complain to Sony and get this fixed. The one controller that the PS4 Pro came with, the left analog stick, if you look at it like from the side, is tilted in the neutral position ever so slightly, and I'm not having any of that. So I'm using my old DualShock because they didn't change the controller or any. They just changed it. Like the buttons are now like ugly gray instead of black, and I think maybe the triggers might be a little bit better. But anyway, I'm going to complain to Sony and say, hey, look, I took this thing out of the box. I've never touched it. In the neutral position, all of these analog sticks should be straight up and down. This one is tilted to give me a new thing. And I'm sure Sony will be happy to do that for me.
Oh, I'm sure.
On the one side, John, I truly, genuinely admire how perceptive you are and how you can notice these little things.
Oh, you would notice it. It's not like, oh, this is obscure. I'd only notice if I took it like out a level or a plumb bob. You'd notice it with your eyeballs. It is not subtle.
But with that said, I am so glad that I am at worst mildly critical and not hypercritical like you are.
This whole conversation, I'm sitting here thinking, thank God this is one area I don't really care about. Like, I don't care about gaming really at all. I'd like to, but I don't. I barely care about TVs. I barely care about TV adjustments and picture quality adjustments and everything. I certainly don't care about analog sticks being slightly tilted from neutral. I am just so happy that because there are so many areas that I care way too much about. At least here's one that I don't.
Yep.
I'm not carving my own analog sticks out of plastic. That'd be the equivalent of you roasting your own beans.
Hey, roasting your own beans is really not that hard. and it's really good.
I know, but I'm saying like it's one thing to be picky about the things that you buy, but at a certain point you say, no, there's nothing I can buy. I must make it myself, and that would be the equivalent of me carving my own controllers and like a controller assembly kit and like making my own analog sticks and like assembling it from pieces.
You try to find good coffee on this half of the county, I guarantee you can't find it.
There's no good controllers either, but I just accept what they sell me. Wow. I just want it to be like, correct as when it comes out of the box, everything should be straight.
If you could make your own perfect controller for $5 in 20 minutes, wouldn't you do it?
And then I have to drink it and it's gone and I got to do it all over again. Hence the analogy is breaking down.
All right. So anyway, this monitor that you bought, John, is not HDR. Is that correct?
No, it's not.
Isn't that one of because that's why you bought that god awful red racing striped ViewSonic was to get?
No, none of them are. No, you can't get as far as I'm aware. There are none for sale. There is no gaming monitor. Like I said, you can get a TV with HDR. You can get a 4K TV with HDR support for your PS4 Pro. But as far as I was able to determine, there is no computer monitor that you can buy, as in a thing that's 27 inches and not 55 that you put on a desk that has HDR support.
This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com. Enter offer code ATP at checkout to get 10% off. Squarespace sites look amazing. They look professionally designed, regardless of your skill level, and you don't have to code. Although if you want to, you can jump in there and edit the code. You can do things like inject JavaScript or inject your own CSS, move around the blocks, customize your theme. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. You can drag and drop things if you want to. You can just change colors and stuff, or you can change nothing. It's totally up to you with Squarespace with their intuitive, easy-to-use tools for building websites. It is such a huge difference from the way we used to build websites. It is so much easier today with Squarespace. You got to check it out. If you're making a site for yourself, or even better, if you're making a site for somebody else, if you do it on Squarespace, they support it. You don't have to be involved. It's amazing. So if you're making a website for somebody else, or if you just want to save time yourself, which is usually the right move, because you know what? These days, the worst use of your time is updating a website CMS. You need to outsource that to Squarespace, whether you're making the site for yourself or somebody else. Let them handle that so you can do your project. You can share your photos, you can make your store, you can make your portfolio, you can make a blog, a website for your business or anything else. You can do everything you need to do with Squarespace. So check it out today. Go to squarespace.com, start a free trial. When you decide to sign up, which you probably will because it's amazing, use offer code ATP to get 10% off your purchase. Thanks a lot to Squarespace for sponsoring our show.
Can you guys see the difference between wide color and not? Because maybe I've just never really had a good example photo in like two screens next to each other, but briefly before I gave up my 6S when I had, but I did have my 7, I held the two of them side by side and damned if I could tell the difference. And I don't know if it's just that my eyes are crappy, which they unequivocally are, if I just don't appreciate it, which is possible, or is it just not that big a deal if you're not like a designer? Like Marco, for example, are you able to tell the difference when you just look at an arbitrary photo on a wide color display versus a not wide color display?
Not yet. I suspect as wide color displays become what I'm looking at every day, because like right now I do most of my computing on a 2014 5K iMac, which does not have the high color display. And so I now have it on my phone and on my iPad, but really I'm doing almost all of my, looking at things on my iMac.
But it doesn't matter where you look at them. It's the source material. So Casey, if you have something if you look at the same picture that you took in a pre-wide color world, of course it's going to look the same because there's no wide color information in it. You have to take the picture with a device capable of capturing that and then look at that same picture, one on like your iPhone 7 that you took it on that took a wide color picture, and then the other one on that.
I thought that's what I did, but truth be told, it was right when I first got the 7. I wouldn't have put it past me to accidentally have taken like an old picture and said, "Oh, I don't see anything." But and I've seen like the sample images, like where there's like a big red blob and there's an R hidden in there that you wouldn't see unless it's wide color, and stuff like that. But nevertheless, on a regular picture, I've not noticed the difference. And as a corollary question, is my 2-year-old Micro Four Thirds, I presume that's not wide color. Is that fair to say?
most cameras most cameras don't have this option. Middle and high-end cameras often will have an option to save the colors in Adobe RGB, maybe, instead of like sRGB. But as far, I haven't looked too much into this. As far as I know, that I think that conversion happens after RAW anyway, so you might be able to fix this with just a different RAW conversion process. John, do you know about this?
I was going to say what you said. Like, there are other color profiles that are not called P3 that nevertheless have a larger range than sRGB.
Yeah, like Adobe RGB is one of them.
Yeah, I don't know what the little envelopes look like on all of them, but and especially if you capture RAW, like, yeah, then that's all the information you're going to get, and if you can pull more stuff out of it, I don't know. But yeah, I would, like, your best source for images with wide color is your iPhone 7, because it's, it's all connected up end to end there. If you I'm sure you've looked at Craig Hockenberry's page where he has a bunch of sample images. Mm-hmm. If you really can't tell the difference between the sample images, because they're made to like emphasize the areas where humans can perceive the P3 color difference more, those really emphasize, and those are kind of like artificial. But I have seen some other pictures where it's like just a picture of like a park with like grass and a tree and some sky. And if you see them side by side, like I do on my iPad Pro, and I go to that page, like, all right, I mean, it doesn't jump out at you. But if you look, you're like, is this really the same picture? It's like, yes, this is literally the same picture. Just one is sRGB, and then the other one is showing the full wide color. And the full wide color one, it's almost like contrast is turned down in the other one. Like, there's not, like, the greens don't look as green. Like in this, in the grass type situation, you're like, oh, that tree looks a little bit more pastel-y and washed out. Not a lot, but you have to see them side by side to see it. I don't think I could pick one out alone, but if you literally show me the same picture and wide and not wide, you go, oh, the wide looks a little better. That's about it.
Okay, yeah. So I'm not entirely crazy then, because I'm looking at this link on WebKit, and we'll put it in the show notes, and they have, like, and this is what I was thinking of, they have the WebKit logo, which is like this big red blob that in sRGB you don't see the logo, and then if you go into P3 you can see the logo. Well, if you scroll down on that same page, they have a yellow flower, and if you click, this is like what you were saying, John, if you click between the sRGB only and the P3, unequivocally, I can tell that the P3 is much more vivid and looks more real. But if I were to look at either of these images, like you said, John, without the other side by side, unlike, say, a Retina screen versus a non-Retina screen, where it's just unbelievably obvious, with these, I don't think I would notice the difference unless they're side by side.
I mean, that's how I am with most of these too. Like the example of things, if I look at it like on my iPad Pro, which is currently my biggest P3 screen, these pictures look great, sure. Like the big orangey sunsets, like, yeah, they do look a little more saturated in those like orangey reddish tones. But you can look at a non-Retina screen or a non-Retina image or asset on a web page on a Retina screen, and you can tell that difference immediately. The very first thing you see that is non-Retina, after you're accustomed to Retina, you notice that immediately. Whereas if I am scrolling through a web page and I see a picture of an orangey sunset that is not P3 after I'm used to P3, I don't think I will notice, because it could just look like it wasn't as saturated of a picture as it could have been. And so it's not, it's a way smaller advance for everyday casual observing, and for most people. It's nice to have. I'm glad they're doing it. And it's especially nice, if you actually shoot a lot of pictures of orangey sunsets and things. But it's a very, in general use, it's the kind of thing you can very easily forget that you even have.
Okay, that was my experience as well, and I was curious because I feel like, and maybe it's just because I follow people like Hockenberry and Mark Edwards, and they're really revved up about it. But to me, I was like, man, I barely see the difference, and I'm glad to hear that that's not necessarily unusual.
So 2 more things on the monitors. First, Casey, when you get back to work, you should tap the underside of one of the corners of your monitor and see if you've got a bobblehead too, because I think you have.
Oh, I definitely do. Oh yeah.
So, yeah, that's like, what a bad job. Like, the stand has one simple function: just put the monitor up off the desk, off the ground, and keep it still. And it fails at that thing. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, the one thing, even though it's LG monitors, there's not much to it. Like, it is just black everywhere. It's not matte. It's not shiny. Doesn't have much of a frame around it. It's not a 5-head. The part on the bottom is the biggest part. So, like, it's proportioned. The LG logo is small and subtle. But if you go to that Amazon page for my thing and do the little zoomy thing, where you can, zoom in and see the LG logo, right? Move over to the right from the LG logo. What do you see there lurking in the corner? Because this is a PC product. It's just got to be ugly in some stupid way. What do you see there? The stupid Energy Star. And it's small. It's not a big Energy Star badge. And it's black and white. Like, it's not colored and weird. But it's like the whole front of this thing has nothing on it. I will accept the LG logo. It is small and tasteful and centered. Why the hell is an Energy Star sticker? And so I'm like, I'm just going to peel that sticker off. But it's one of those stickers where I'm going to have to think on it for a while because it is clearly not one of those ones that comes off easy. You know, the ones that are like made to come off.
Like the metal one?
Oh, my goodness.
It's not metal. It's not plastic. But like, here's the math I have to do. Like, I know I could get it off. But after I get it off, what's left underneath the square where it used to be, will that look worse than the sticker? Because the sticker, for all its ugliness, looks like a sticker. Right? It's the Energy Star logo. If I peel it off and there's a bunch of like sticky crap or I damage the plastic underneath it, because it's all just cheap plastic. This is not an aluminum Apple display or anything, right? If I damage it somehow or get sticky stuff in there that I somehow can't get off with, careful application of Skin So Soft on it, which, by the way, that's a secret for all you out there. If you get sticky crap from stickers on them, one of the many things that will remove it, I know there are many products, but one of the ones that I've used for years is Avon's Skin So Soft, which I think was supposed to be a thing that softens your skin. The only thing I've ever used it for is to take off sticker scum. And it's got a pleasant odor.
Oh, my God. Why? I love the extent to which we will avoid talking about the Microsoft Surface Studio.
No, we'll get there. We'll get there. Anyway, Energy Star sticker, it's just got to be ugly in some way. And like I said, I don't like that semicircular horseshoe stand. I don't know who thought that was nice, but it's not.
So that Energy Star sticker that on your monitors on the bottom right, I have what appeared to be an identical one. But if you look at the stand and you know how it's kind of tilted at a sort of not a 45-degree angle, but like a 30-degree angle maybe. Well, mine was all the way on the left on that stand, and I let it sit for a week or two before I even noticed it, and then I was like, oh, this is crap. And you know what I did? I immediately ripped it off because I don't worry about things like you do, and there was no residue. Or if there was residue, I like rubbed at it with my thumb for a second.
You don't know if there's residue. You probably just... I don't even see it in the Amazon picture of your monitor. I don't see the Energy Star sticker anywhere on it.
You're right. I don't see it either, but it was there for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, I might make a run at that sticker eventually.
Just rip it off, John. It's like a Band-Aid. Just rip it off.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Speaking of Windows stuff, we got a series of tweets from Jordan, who is Nerdiophage on Twitter. And he tweeted 5 things. I'll read them in series. He says, I spent a week with a MacBook Pro Escape after 2 solid decades of Windows use. I was of the opinion that Marco's unabashed dislike of the OS, of Windows, was equal parts adoptive culture / fanboyism / showmanship. I stand corrected and a little bit humbled. The Windows path from neophyte to power user is shaped by registry edits, decoder rings, and secret knocks, which is arduous. macOS, by comparison, feels inviting, friendly, and intuitive, like a late-night conversation at a dinner party with good friends. So TLDR, this is still Jordan, macOS, holy crap, I get it. Transition cost will be very high, but seriously considering it. And this echoes my experience in 2008 of switching from Windows to OS 10 at the time. There were 2 weeks where I doubted my life and thought I'd made a terrible, awful, horrible choice, and then I'd never look back. I'm not saying that Jordan's experience is true for everyone, because now we're going to have all the Windows apologists writing in telling us how Windows is good and we're a bunch of jerks and blah, blah, blah. But
do they still really listen to us?
Some do, because we still get emails. I'm not saying that this is true for everyone. I'm not saying Windows isn't better in some way or another. But what I am saying is that we are not the only ones that seem to think that there's a better way. So just thought I'd share those series of tweets from Jordan. So thank you, Jordan, for writing us. We had an interesting conversation in Slack, Marco, and I'd like to air a grievance. Let's back up to circa January, maybe December, so almost a year ago now. And the two of you, but my recollection was that it was mostly Marco, were saying, you know what, Casey? You should never put personal crap on your laptop, on your work laptop. You should really have a nice, powerful machine for home use. You probably shouldn't be ignoring Erin and using your laptop while you're sitting next to her on the couch. You know what you need? You need an iMac. I've tried the laptop dance, Casey. It's no good. It's no good, man. Get the iMac. Think about that 27-inch beautiful at 5K display with wide color, blah, 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 blah. I'm telling you, it's the way to go.
I have some nitpicks with your summary already, but go ahead.
But then fast forward to, I don't know, a few days ago, when Marco is talking in Slack, that private place that we really shouldn't bring up publicly, but here I am because I'm annoyed. Marco is talking in Slack and saying, you know what? Maybe I'll get a new MacBook Pro and a 5K display, and I'll be back to a one-machine man again, and I won't even have to have a stupid desktop anymore.
That's not... Okay. So here's what I said. So basically looking at performance of everything and figuring a potential and maybe even likely future that does not include the Mac Pro existing and also includes standalone 5K Retina displays that can plug into laptops that have not matching, but maybe 90% of the performance of iMacs. Or 80% of the performance of iMacs. I always say the reason I buy the 15-inch laptops is because when I'm traveling, I either need almost nothing, in which case it doesn't matter what I have, and the laptop's mainly there to to type emails faster, or to browse Twitter, or I'm doing serious work, whether it's Xcode or Lightroom photo raw importing and stuff and editing. Either way, usually when I use a laptop during travel, I want a lot of screen space and I want a lot of horsepower. I also now have an iMac as my main computer, and looking at the specs of these computers these days, and comparing the new MacBook Pros with LG 5K display, assuming it's good, which we don't actually know yet, but we'll assume it's good because it probably is. Comparing that against the iMac. Basically I am maintaining and upgrading and paying for two different computers with overall fairly similar hardware and fairly similar performance. And so I thought, what I probably should do, but won't, and I bolded won't, but I said what I probably should do is stop having two similarly spec'd Macs that I pay for and maintain and everything, or just have a top-of-the-line 15-inch MacBook Pro that I use, like many people do, in clamshell mode on my desk most of the time. But then when I travel, I can just take that with me and have all the power of this maxed-out computer with me. That is what I should do. It is not what I'm doing. And maybe in the future I will do that. You know me. I always change everything up because I'm never happy. So maybe in the future I will do that. I think I really want to wait and see what happens with the Mac Pro next year first. If it turns out the Mac Pro is really dead and that the best we can ever hope for on desktops is iMac hardware that's 10 or 20% faster than the MacBook Pros of the day, then that might make a lot of sense, actually, for me. But
you won't be able to handle the fan noise. I guarantee it. You can just think of that.
But the iMac also has fan noise. That's the problem.
But not as loud as a 15-inch. No way.
Well, so again, I want to see the new 15-inches first. I want to have some experience with them, hopefully, to see is this really how are these machines? They really did reduce the fan noise noticeably when they moved from the old crappy symmetrical fan blades to the Retina MacBook Pro in 2012. When Jony first talked about the asymmetric fan blades, they showed the waveform.
Yeah, it's not louder, but the annoyingness of it. And the asymmetrical really helped with the annoyingness. It turned it more into a white noise thing, but I think it's still not a contest. I'm annoyed that I can hear the iMac at all. I'm annoyed at what I hear when I hear a laptop going with I haven't heard the new ones, obviously, but the asymmetrical fan ones, I don't like the sound of a white noise generating machine.
Yeah, neither do I. And I don't see when my iMac fans spin up, I consider that something that I either need to put headphones on right now and stop hearing this, or I need to find with the process that is using all my CPU power and just kill it. Because I really do not like hearing fan noise while I work. It's simple as that. So, a Mac Pro is silent under load in most rooms, and that's one of the reasons I love it. And that's one of the things I will greatly miss if it is truly dead forever. Which, again, I think it's looking increasingly likely. We'll see what happens next year. But anyway, so all I was saying was, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to maintain two different 4-core mid-range to high-end machines from Apple when I occasionally need one on the road, but most of the time it's at my desk. It would make more sense to consolidate that into one computer and maybe even pull an iMac/CGP Grey and have two laptops. Maybe I have that crazy one and also a very small one, like either an Escape or a MacBook One, for the travel needs during which I don't need a lot of power and I just want to have the smallest thing possible, and that would hardly ever get upgraded. But that is a world that I probably should go to, but currently I am not going to that world because currently I'm still waiting out the potential Mac Pro of the future. So I will see. ATB Tister is pointing out in the chat room that I should not forget that 6-core chips will be coming to the iMac Consumer Core i7 line, presumably in the near future. A 6-core iMac would be awesome. I would really prefer more. If I'm going to upgrade from 4, I want a big upgrade. I want to go to 8 or 12 even, or even more if I can get it. So it'd be nice to have even more, but we'll see. Again, this all depends on what the hardware brings over the next year or two, and whether Apple even makes computers that use these chips that are coming out. We don't even know that. So we'll see. Time will tell. But right now, I am not going all laptop. But all I was saying that if I were more sensible, it would probably be a better allocation of resources to just do that, which is probably the reason why so many people do exactly that.
Indeed. All right, I just wanted to grumble at you publicly for a moment, so I feel much better now. Thanks, everyone.
Anytime. We're sponsored tonight by Betterment. Go to betterment.com/ATP for investing made better. Betterment is the largest automated investing service out there that's independent, managing more than $5.5 billion for over 180,000 customers as of this past September. Betterment has changed the investing industry by making investing easier and at a lower cost than traditional financial advising services. Betterment manages your investments with the same strategies that financial advisors use with clients who have millions of dollars. And you've probably heard about them in the press, such as the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and TechCrunch. The financial services industry has embraced technology and innovation through the creation of automated investing platforms like Betterment, meaning that you keep more of your money with fees that are a fraction of what you pay for traditional financial services. Excess cash that's generated is automatically reinvested, so every dollar you invest is put to work. Your portfolio is also automatically rebalanced as necessary. Now, investing involves risk. But right now, you can get up to 6 months of no fees by going to betterment.com/ATP. That's betterment.com/ATP. Betterment, investing made better.
Apple has released a new MacBook and things. There's a new design book, and half of me thinks I really don't see a problem with it. And half of me thinks, my word, have they lost all sense of reality? And I haven't decided which one's which.
Did anybody see this coming?
I didn't.
Sure.
For sure.
I think it's a totally reasonable and to be expected thing for them to do. In fact, I'm surprised they don't do more of it. I mean, they sell shirts with their things on them. They sell all sorts of merchandise that has Apple stuff on it. They love having giant posters of all their, they're proud of their design, and this particular thing as sort of a capper to Jony Ive's career at Apple, like, it makes total sense. I don't think it's all that weird.
There are a few things that are different about it. I mean, first of all, like the T-shirts and mugs and everything, you can only buy at their company store or at their conference. So you can't just go into any Apple store or go online and order an Apple T-shirt. That's kind of like a limited thing they keep only to their store.
Well, I'm assuming this will be limited too. Like, how long do you think they'll sell this? They're going to be selling it for 5 years, unless maybe Tim Cook says, we can keep selling the same design book for 10 years. We'll never have to lower the price.
Sure, but the other stuff is more it's like a gift shop at a museum. It's like I went to Apple to either WWDC or to their campus, and so I got this expensive T-shirt because I went there, and that's a little bit more justifiable if you have a problem with this. By the way, I don't necessarily have a problem with this. I'm mostly indifferent on it. I mostly don't care that it exists. I do think it shows a few things worth considering. Things like possible Jony Ive retirement. Overall, though, it seems poorly timed at a time when Apple is being criticized for neglecting a lot of their product line, and their new release is being criticized for being an especially poor value for the money, and they appear to have cut dongle prices in an effort to show maybe that they're not just trying to get a whole bunch of extra money from accessory sales. So it is kind of an unfortunate time, even if you ignore the election, which I don't think you should. But even if you ignore that, this is kind of a weird time for Apple to release an incredibly self-congratulatory, highfalutin $200 to $300 book about themselves. It's a little bit poorly timed, I think. But even if you don't agree with that, if you set that aside, I think it's mostly fine. I do think it is one of many signs pointing to Jony Ive's probably not that far off departure or retirement from Apple. Or maybe he'll just ascend further into the clouds of bizarre titles that mean he doesn't actually do any day-to-day work. But that might be the same thing. I don't know. But I'm not sure if I want one or not. I might be one of the ideal customers for it. I buy stupid, expensive things all the time. And I like Apple stuff usually a lot. As I was looking, though, at some of the pages that like they have on their sample site and everything, they just kind of make me sad. Because they show like on their store, the samples show the Mac Mini case and like the big cutting wheel. I'm sorry, I don't know the terms for these various manufacturing tools. Like some giant spiky wheel that presumably carves out part of the inside of the Mac Mini case. And it's like, oh, that's really nice that you care so much about the Mac Mini that you'll take this picture of the machine that makes its case. What about the product? That's been pretty neglected, pretty badly. Or it showed like a picture of the bottom assembly with the lid popping off of the previous generation non-Retina MacBook Pros. Like it might even be the 101 exactly. And it shows the MacBook Pro bottom lid taken off, and you have the removable battery, and you have the removable upgradable hard drive. And it's like, oh yeah, remember when laptops were upgradable and easily repaired? It's like, I think this book would mostly just make me sad, honestly, about either computers that Apple has neglected and that I am sad about, like the Mac Pro, which I assume is in there, or features of computers that are no longer present, that have been cut through the march of, quote, progress over the years, some of which is real progress, some of which is just cutting things. So I don't know how I feel about this for myself, but if other people want to have this book and enjoy it, that's fine, really. Again, I do think the release is poorly timed, but other than that, I don't really have a problem with it.
I think I mostly agree, but I already have a copy. It's just called Iconic.
Yeah.
Right. I have Iconic somewhere, I think, too. I have the old Apple design book from the 90s. It's called let me check the title. Hang on.
While you're checking, there is one nitpick I do want to not forget about, though, and that is so Steve Jobs' name is all over this book. His name's all over the press release. They very prominently dedicate it to him and everything. I think enough people have said that I don't need to say too much about that. It's questionable whether Jobs would have actually approved this project and used it. I will say, though, that a lot of people keep saying that this project was started 8 years ago, and therefore that was back when Jobs was alive, and therefore he must have implicitly approved it. And that's not entirely clear. When Jony Ive gave that interview to W-something Wallpaper, whatever it was, I forget, I'm sorry, it mentioned that they started collecting the product to photograph 8 years ago. That doesn't mean they started photographing for this specific project that was approved by Jobs 8 years ago. So I do want to make that clear, that we don't know that Jobs knew this at all. And I think I can't imagine that he would have appreciated it. But,
well,
it's always risky for tech people like us to say, well, Steve Jobs wouldn't have done this or wouldn't have liked this, because you don't really know him. The guy changed his mind a lot, and he's not here anymore to refute it. So it's not a great thing to rest on. But I do think plastering his name all over it is maybe not so great.
They just dedicated it to him. It's not like they're trying to build on his image to sell this book. Like, the book sells itself on its merits. It's just dedicated to him. It's in the memory of their friend. I think that's fine. And if we can say one thing about this book, it is that Steve Jobs would like to have it in his house. Whether or not he thinks it's a product Apple should sell, I guarantee you he would love to have this book. He would sit there on his couch with his bare feet and leaf through it and look at the great work that he's done. Whether he thinks it's things Apple should be selling is a whole other story. Whether he thinks Apple should have a museum of all their old stuff is a whole other story. But he so clearly took pride in all the products that are in this thing that he himself, just personally, would surely love to have the best possible photographs on the best possible paper made in Germany with special gilding around the edges, and he would love this book.
this seems like a really cool thing to make for your employees, or to maybe sell for a limited time at your campus store. But to sell it as like a whole product, I think that kind of raises the bar and raises the level of criticism a bit, a little bit unnecessarily maybe. But because like I think it would be a lot cooler if this was a thing for all the employees that they just all got for free. Which, by the way, are they even getting it for free? Probably not. If they're charging $200 or $300 for it. But imagine if they gave this to all the employees, and the handful of Apple collectors who really want it would have to like go find it on eBay or something like that. It would be so much cooler if you had one. If that was the case, I don't know. It just seems like that might have been a better way to go here.
Yeah, I tend to agree. So I just reached out to the bookcase behind me and grabbed my copy of Iconic, and I started paging through it, and I landed on page 130 of Iconic, and it has a quote which I will read to you. If you never change anything, then what you can really engineer is kind of incremental. But when you're willing to change things, then you kind of open up a whole new world of design. This is Big Bob Mansfield at the launch of the 2012 MacBook Pro, and the accompanying picture is a MacBook Pro that has MagSafe, Ethernet, FireWire, Thunderbolt, 2 USB ports, an SD card slot, a line in, and a headphone jack. I just thought that was kind of funny.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah. So when you're willing to change things, and you open up a whole new world of design, like fewer ports.
So the book next to me is called Apple Design, all one word, capital A, capital D, : the work of the Apple Industrial Design Group. And it's an older book, so it's got the stuff from before you guys were Mac users. It's like mostly the era. Well, Iconic spans the whole range. But anyway, it's definitely earlier than the stuff that's in this book. And I could say I would like to own this book too. I would totally like to own this book. But I wouldn't like to own it $300 worth at this point. Because, and here's the thing, like, it's not that $300 for a really super high quality photo book is that big a deal. It's just that for me personally, with, having just bought a monitor and a PlayStation 4 Pro and all sorts of other stuff, I would spend $300 in this if it was like the making of the Star Wars books that I bought, which by the way, weren't $300. Like basically if it was lots more words. Not that I don't like the pictures. I want the pictures. But if it was the pictures, but also page upon page upon page of the designers, including Jony himself, telling the story of how they came up with these designs in as much detail as they can possibly remember. Again, like the making of the Star Wars books, which are not first-person accounts, but it's like someone researched and talked to all the people involved and tried to lay out, here's how each of the three original trilogy Star Wars movies was made, from conception through to production and design, talking to all the people involved and getting quotes from them and putting it all together. That's what I would like to read. And my impression is this book is either entirely or at least mostly pictures and not so much about Apple's going to tell you, how the sausage is made. I'm sure there's lots of pictures of prototypes and, like the things with the tool that Marco talked about or whatever, but it's not really like, tell us, how did you come up with this? Because I would love to read that, but that is not this. And what I'm saying is basically, if those words were in this book, I would pay $300 for it in a second. But just the photos, I have a longing to own this book, but cannot bring myself to part with $300 for it quite yet. Maybe I'll break down. It depends on how long they sell this. Maybe I'll succumb to it at some point because I really do want this book. I have tons of books like this, but boy, $300 is tough. And no, I don't want the small one because come on.
That's another thing. Why are there two sizes? Like, that's such a Tim Cook thing. Just make it one.
They should have called the big one the Plus. Yes. Some people want a larger book.
Obviously. Mm-hmm.
The big one is huge, though. Like, the big one, I'm thinking about if I had that in my house, how the hell would I even fit it on my shelves? I don't think I even have any shelves. The making of Star Wars books are a little bit too big for my shelves, too. But, if it's photos, come on, you got to get the big one.
Yeah, I just got to say, this Iconic book, I hadn't paged through it in a long time. Man, is this a nice book. It really honestly is. And it's cheap now. It's like $50 on Amazon right now. It's definitely worth it.
I wonder if I can get the business rep discount on the book.
Yeah, 15% off your $300 book. So my Apple Design book is right next to The Art of Kiki's Delivery Service, The Complete Works of Larry Elmore. What else do I have? Hyrule Historia, Legend of Zelda book, all of which are about the same size, big kind of glossy photo book things, but none of which cost $300.
No, it's, people who know more about art books are, and, as you said, John, like, I don't think it's outrageously priced for what it is, but it certainly doesn't contribute, or it certainly doesn't help the recent or possibly the forever reputation of Apple for this like elitist company making expensive things that only for rich people. Like this doesn't really help that image at all. This really, I don't know. Again, this is not a big deal. I don't feel that strongly about this book either way. I might even buy one, who knows. But I do think it was a little poorly timed for image sake, I think.
And see, the weird thing about this book is I like the idea that Apple itself is the one doing it, because as great as Iconic is in the Apple design books or whatever, Apple presumably, you would think they would have access to all this stuff, but apparently they didn't and had to go out and buy it or whatever. But either way, like Apple's really good at taking pictures of its products. They have the most experience of anybody in the entire world taking pictures of Apple products, because that's what they do, and they do it really, really well. And because they're all obsessive, detailed people about like the printing and the color and the paper, I bet it's a really nice book, right? But the one thing that Apple can bring to this book above and beyond those two things that I just mentioned that nobody else can is that they have the best access to the people who were involved in making these. Some of those people may be gone, although supposedly there's very little turnover in Jony Ive's little design group there. That's the value they can bring to this. Because the whole angle you're getting at, Mark, was like, Apple's making a book about how great they are. It's right. They're making a book about themselves and saying, we are awesome. Or just look at all these cool things that we made, which I guess is okay. But if you want to blunt that, it's like, don't just make it look at these awesome things that we made. Bring the value that only you have. Tell us the stories, people who worked on these products. Tell us about how you made them, because no one else can tell us how they made them. Other people can take pictures of them. Other people can make a big glossy photo book. Other people could probably find the right kind of paper and do the cool printing and do all the things. But nobody but you guys can tell us the story of how these products were made. And they're not doing that. So they're like saying how great they are, but like, I don't want to tell you too much about it. Just look at this stuff. We're pretty great, huh? Never mind how it was made. And that definitely shades more into that makes it less forgivable as an act of, self-congratulations. Because if you are describing how you did it, you're not just congratulating yourself. Even if the whole book is like, we had these hard problems and we solved them because we were super smart. You're passing on your knowledge. You're telling the rest of the world, learn from our lessons, which you can still do with a lot of ego and, back patting. But I think that would offset the look how great we are angle of it. And like you said, and like many people said, like, and like we talked about with the new MacBook Pros, the past several shows, it's not so much the thing itself, it's the context into which it's introduced. And so, like Marco said, the timing is bad. And at this point, almost anything you introduced into the context of a certain set of grumpy Apple fans is going to be looked upon with a very critical eye, and people are generally in a bad mood for reasons that some of which may be outside Apple's control. Whatever, like if they've been building towards this for 8 years, fine, whatever, release it. Like holiday season, it's a good gift idea for the Apple nerd in your life. I don't fault them. I don't think it's that big a deal. I just wish it wasn't $300 because I really want this book.
And one thing, like I think you nailed it about like. Part of this I think that rubs people the wrong way is the fact that there are no words, or as you said, like they have access to the people. They could have added a more human touch, and it seems like we haven't read the book yet, but from the few sample pages we've seen, it really does seem like they didn't. There's no words in it, and I think if I had to summarize, I guess the main disappointment I have with Apple recently, which I think a lot of people feel but might not have put into words, is that it seems to just lack humanity recently. Like this might be a Steve to Tim thing. I don't know. I haven't given a ton of thought to this yet. It's hard to put it into words, but Steve, even though we knew he could be like cold and ruthless to people when he had to be, his public persona, which really did reflect upon the whole company, to the public, was really quite warm and human. And with the transition to Tim Cook's Apple and Jony Ive's Apple, which is that's really this is what this is these days. Apple, the public image that we get, even though most of the same people are still there, but the public image that is shown to us, what gets out, is a lot more cold. And the humanity has been stripped out of it. And I think part of what bugged people about things like removing the startup chime on the new MacBook Pros and removing the light up logo on the back is like that's a little bit more of this humanity that's just being pulled out of the products, and we don't see warmth and humanity as much as we used to anymore. A promo video showing what people are doing with the products is different.
Do you think it's humanity?
I do. I do think it's humanity. I think we don't.
I would say, you don't think whimsy is a better word? Because there's a stronger case for whimsy. Because humanity, I think of like Tim Cook is much more into the human aspects or social aspects of both the products and the company than Steve Jobs ever was. And Tim Cook, in the Tim Cook era, he's the one who's constantly starting presentations with videos about accessibility and people who are being, the human story of being empowered by Apple products. I would call that human too. But whimsical is, where like it is dorky. Maybe, whimsy is just like the little Happy Mac and the chime and the little poof animation and stuff. Silly things like that seem to not be to Jony Ive's taste, because he's not into the poof, right? He's not into the Happy Mac, the smile, and the chime. He's into the iPhone that doesn't even have a logo that you can see when you look at it, right? And Tim Cook is deferring to Jony Ive in that way, so I think you're right to refer to it as the Tim Cook / Jony Ive Apple. So there is definitely less sense of whimsy. And whimsy can be seen as warmth, and his design aesthetic can be thought of as cold. But I think Tim Cook's Apple and Tim Cook in specifically are all about humanity, just not about dorkiness and whimsy.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying that like the company, like, because we, the same people are mostly there, right? Especially like at the upper levels, not a lot has changed there. We know that they do good. These are good people, and they do good things for the world. But it doesn't come across the amount of warmth and maybe humanity might not be exactly the right word. I do think whimsy is part of it, but I don't think whimsy covers all of what I'm missing.
What about the ads? Like when they show a lot of their recent ads have been all about showing people using the product. Like remember the one with like the kid with his nose buried in his phone during the holidays, the Christmas thing, and at the end he's made the video of them making the stuff, like, or just like the people who are like with your watch, you get up and it's early in the morning, it's still dark out, you lace up your sneakers, you put on your watch, you go out running, or you're running through the rain with your now water resistant phone. Like their ads, even more than they used to be, have been less about glorifying the objects as these beautiful totems of technology as like, look how smooth and sleek it is, which they still do in like the presentations to us. But on television, it's all about the people. It's all about, I am a runner, I like to take photographs, I'm on a family vacation, and buy this device and your kid will be it will look like a sulky teenager, but really he will be a loving, wonderful, creative child, which is false advertising. But anyway, he'll just sulk and won't actually make a video for you. He's just texting his friends the whole time. Like the ads seem to be focusing on, again, the humanity of like that is not about the products, it's about the people and what the products enable the people to do. So again, that's Apple chooses what kind of ads it makes. Like the advertising company makes them, but Apple can give them direction. And it is less like that, in the Steve Jobs era, you had a series of commercials that were all about showing you the hardware, like the Lifesavers iMacs flying across the screen. Look, they're shiny and colored, and look at when the iMac SE came out, it's all sleek and graphite-y. Like those were more obsessed with the objects, because that was all about like, hey, hardware can be fashion, and look at these things. And I think it started to shift with the iPod, where it was like, yeah, there's silhouettes dancing, and you can see the iPod with the white cord, but it's all about people dancing in music. And at this point, they're selling phones by showing you people jogging, right? So it is so far from, I think it is definitely a very human approach. But again, I would say that the product designs themselves and what things the company decides to do definitely seem less whimsical and less dorky, and I could see that as being, say, more cold and less warm.
The ads, you're right, the ads are fine, but they're ads, they're commercials. I'm referring to mostly the products, and then some also of the presentations, by the actual humans on stage at the events. So again, it's hard to not make this about Steve, because Steve was really good at really being personable up there on stage, and whether it was rehearsed or fake or real or whatever, I don't know. It didn't matter. It really did come across as genuine and real and warm, and that's what I miss both on stage. I don't care about the videos. The use of more and more videos actually, to me, feels colder. It feels more artificial. But that's beside the point for now. All I'm saying is I miss this level of warmth that we used to get from them in these presentations, and then I think the whimsy in the product is part of that. That showed in the products, and it seems like modern Apple is all about really editing that out as part of a march towards quote simplifying or quote progress. But we're losing a lot of that, and we don't seem to be gaining it in many areas anymore. It seems like the company just moved on past that, and it's just a lot more like cold and almost robotic. So this book coming out with all pictures of Jony Ive's robotic tools in stark white backgrounds with no words, I think is kind of like a culmination of that cold process, and that's what rubs me the wrong way about the book and about Apple today, if I had to summarize it down. Again, I'm sorry if I'm not expressing this well. This is really still a very squishy thought in my head, but I'm trying to put into words a complex feeling that I've been feeling over a while. But I just miss that warmth that we used to get, whether it was real or not, from both Steve and the products. That I think we're really missing a lot of that recently.
So if you were to get this book, and if it was chronological, which I'm not sure that it is, but if it is chronological, you could flip through it and watch the whimsy slowly drain out of the products as you start with tangerine iMacs and all these brightly colored things that the toilet seat iBooks and all these things that just look so exciting and Dr. Seussy, and slowly but surely everything turns silver and glass and uniform and not shiny and not matte and just in betweeny, and just it smooths out, which I like both those aesthetics. That's why I think like this book highlights some of Apple's best work in terms of industrial design, because it does include all the way from the vibrancy of the original iMacs, and even like the one with the big neck and all the other stuff, all the way up to the modern era of everything being sleek and clean. Those are both great aesthetics, but chronologically speaking, you can see the trend.
I could just read the book backwards and make myself feel really happy.
You could Benjamin Button it. I think I agree with you, Marco. I just can't shake this feeling that Apple is reluctantly moving closer and closer to being the IBM that they fought so hard against when you and I were like really little.
Let's not go crazy here.
Well, no, I don't think they're there, but if you look at the IBM of the early to mid 80s, probably even late 80s, it was not boring, but it did not have whimsy. And I would not say that Apple's products today are boring by any stretch of the imagination, but I agree that they've lost some of that. And I actually think humanity is a good word for it, if a bit overblown, but I can't come up with a better one. And I think I like humanity more than whimsy. But anyway, it just doesn't feel as happy-go-lucky as it used to. And I think part of that is no longer being the underdog and is now being king of the hill, which maybe that's our perception. Maybe it's that because we perceive them as king of the hill, we perceive them as boring and they're anything but. But I don't know. I don't think that's the case. And I agree with you. And it's funny because on the one side, I love the look of the new MacBook Pro, at least in photographs. I haven't seen one in person yet, but in photographs, it looks phenomenal. I love it. I think it looks really great. And I think that's in part because, a very black aesthetic appeals to me. But yet I miss the fun of all these different colored iMacs. The computers that I saw running around campus when I was in school in the early 2000s, they just looked fun. And I wouldn't say a new MacBook Pro looks fun. It looks really damn good. It looks more aesthetically good, I'd say, than perhaps any other laptop on the market today. And in fact, I've said before, and I'll say again, this iPhone 7 I'm holding in my hands right now, this matte black iPhone 7, I think is the best looking iPhone I've seen yet. However, I wouldn't say it looks fun despite it looking really good, and I miss that kind of fun aspect.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the products are bad, or like the products are in many ways better than ever now. Like by most measures, most of the products are better than ever. They're still good products. In many ways, they're still great products. But again, it's just like it's this feeling that I'm missing that we used to have here, and maybe I'm just old and jaded and boring. I don't know. Maybe I'm just mad about the Mac Pro still. I don't know. But this, it just feels like I'm missing this feeling.
I'm not. Well, I am old and jaded, but I'm not jaded about the Mac Pro specifically. And
there we go.
And I'm not jaded about the MacBook Pro specifically. And I do largely agree with you that it's not as fun as it once was. And again, maybe is that just by virtue of them being no longer the underdog? So it's fun to root for the underdog. It's not fun to root for the king of the hill. So maybe it's misplaced. Maybe the problem is us. But I agree with you nevertheless.
I think the design trend that I just described, from the more whimsical computers that varied more widely in shape and color and texture and everything about them, to the current design, is a natural consequence of the advance of the technology. Because as we acquire the technology to make the products that we have now, that, in the case of iDevices, are essentially rectangles that are screens that get increasingly thinner, and for the case of laptops, a screen rectangle and then a rectangle with a keyboard and an increasingly large trackpad, your options for industrial design start to be in conflict with the advances that you're, reaping the benefits of actually being able to make it smaller. Like, if you look at the size of the plastic that surrounds the screen on the toilet seat iMacs, it's vast, right? And that allows you to make this cool looking, strange, oblong kind of purse-like design and everything. That gives you the room to make those big scoops in colors and contrast. But there's no more room for that in a world where it's basically a screen with the margins slowly shrinking around it, or like the laptops, getting thinner and thinner and smaller and tighter. And, why fight that? The correct direction is, aesthetically speaking, to say embrace that and embrace an aesthetic that can work with increasingly svelte devices. And that is yet another reason to add to the list of why the Mac Pro would be great, because the Mac Pro does not have a screen on it. You do have the freedom to make it. They can make it shaped like a soccer ball. It can be shaped like a spiral. Apparently, it can be shaped like a garbage can. It can be shaped like a cheese grater. It actually gives them the most options in terms of industrial design, because they are no longer constrained by the fact that you have to carry it, and that making it smaller and thinner and lighter is such a benefit in the long run that they can't afford to put a giant plastic handle on it and a huge 3-inch border around the entire screen, because that's ridiculous. Like, no one wants that anymore. It looks old, and it is old, and it's bad. But when it sits on your desk or under your desk, a lot more options open up. And so it's just another reason that it would be a shame if they totally gave up that form factor, or if they said, even in that form factor, we want it to be as small and minimal as possible. And so that's how you get the current Mac Mini and the Apple TV, which are just the most, it's not appropriate, I think, for those things to be, well, maybe the Apple TV, because that should be boring because you don't even see it. But the Mac Mini, you can have a little bit more fun with that, maybe. Put some vents and strakes on it, make it look like a Ferrari. I don't know. But there's no reason for it to be as boring as it is. But there are reasons for the phone to be as boring as it is, and for the laptops to be not as boring, but like for them to look like they do. I think there are very good reasons for them to do that. And I think if they had tried to keep the old aesthetic while going along with the march of technology that allows you to make them thinner and lighter, it would be a bad tension between those two things. You can't make a modern laptop that looks like the toilet seat iBook. You just can't. It's not the right design approach. Back then it was, now it's not. Now you could take the current ones and make them in candy apple red with the same form factor, making it like polished, glossy candy apple red, and that would be fun. But it's still, color and texture is basically all they have left to play with, because shape-wise, it's not like they're going to be adding fins and strakes, tail fins on the next iPad Pro or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. Like, why couldn't we have all the colors of the 5C on the 7? Because those were fun, I thought. And I think they appealed to a lot of people that perhaps weren't as, technically minded in terms of stats and like having to have the latest and greatest. I still see 5Cs floating around from time to time. So why not have that color range on the top of the line phone? Well, because it's not proper. I mean, I don't know. I do kind of miss that. Even though on the one side, I wouldn't ever pick any of those. I guess this is my Halo car. Like, I don't really see the need for a Mac Pro, and I'm not trying to open up that conversation again. But to me, I don't see the need for a Mac Pro, but I would notice a array of colors on the iPhone 7 and be pleased that they exist, even though there was no freaking way I would choose anything but matte black or maybe jet black.
Well, that goes back to naked robotic core again. It's like real life, you see phones that are all sorts of colors. That's just not the color of the phone. It's the color of people's cases. I see phone cases.
It's
A huge range of colors, textures, sizes, features, ones that you can put your credit card into, ones that have a place for a stylus to go into. Like, there's a huge things with mirrors on the back of them. They just think clamshell ones with the covers, just huge range. But Apple's not doing any of that. They're just giving you the naked robotic core.
This episode is sponsored by Audible.com with an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more. Get a free 30-day trial at audible.com/ATP. If you want to listen to it, Audible has it. You can listen to audiobooks from virtually every genre, anytime, anywhere. You can play Audible's audiobooks on every device you have. Phones, tablets, computers, even iPods if you still have an iPod. Audiobooks are great for flights, long road trips, or even your daily commute. You may think you don't have time to read books, but you'd be surprised how many audiobooks you can hear each year, even when listening to and from work every day. Audiobooks bring books to life. Many of them are read by the authors themselves, adding an extra dimension to the text. And you can take risks and try new authors and genres without regret with Audible, because they offer the great listen guarantee. If you start an audiobook and don't like it, you can exchange it for another one for free. See and listen for yourself today. When you begin your 30-day free trial, you get your first audiobook for free, and there's no stress or obligation. You can cancel your membership at any time. So with audiobooks and spoken word audio products, you will find what you're looking for with Audible.com. Get a free 30-day trial by signing up today at audible.com/ATP. That's audible.com/ATP. Thanks to Audible for sponsoring our show.
We've been putting off for a long time talking about this Microsoft Surface Studio, and I think that we should probably talk about the Nintendo Switch. We don't actually have to do that, but I couldn't resist.
No, we should do the Surface Studio first. And in fact, it's been so long since the Surface Studio event, whatever the heck that was, that I think we need the chief summarizer in chief to remind everyone what the hell the Microsoft Surface Studio is.
Well, what if the chief summarizer in chief doesn't remember anymore? No, I can wing it. So this was, I don't recall exactly what it was, but it was a few weeks ago that Microsoft had some sort of product demo where they debuted the Surface Studio, which at first appeared to be an iMac. In many ways, it just seemed like an iMac. An iMac, but, well, I guess I should say an iMac and a Mac Mini, right? Because it's the screen of an iMac, it appeared. It's 28 inches. And the computer bits are in a base that looks very much like a Mac Mini. It's all black and aluminum, or at least aluminum colored. And it all looks very snazzy. And I don't mean that sarcastically. It really honestly does look good. And at first, it was like, okay, great, you're doing an iMac, woo-woo. But then they mentioned that, this is a touchscreen, a 28-inch touchscreen. And suddenly people start to go, okay, tell me more. And then the real party trick happened, which was Microsoft explained why there are two arms going from the Mac Mini to the iMac. And those arms allow you, from what they showed, to very effortlessly turn this iMac into kind of an easel. So it's at a very, very shallow angle such that you could use it as though it's a writing surface. And it has with it their equivalent of an Apple Pencil. And even more importantly, it has, or maybe not more importantly, but differently, it also has a Surface Dial. And so what this is a little puck sort of thing. It's actually not that dissimilar from the puck mouse that everyone hated, but much taller. And you can sit that on your desk and you can spin it in order to, change volume or get different, tools as you're using the pen. But where it gets even cooler still, and you have to understand that this hinge that they have genuinely is really neat. It looks really, really clever. But what's cooler still about the Surface Dial, this puck, is that you can drop this thing right on the display, and the display recognizes that it's there and where it is, and allows you to treat that as another control surface. So in the way that the naked robotic core is the most pure realization of what somebody would want for a computing device, of what Apple would want for an iPhone. I think not that this is a naked robotic core, but I feel like this is the most pure realization of what Microsoft hopes for this world that to me is a little bizarro, where you have a touch-based or touch permitted, if nothing else, desktop OS.
So Microsoft's strategy for many years now with its Windows thing, especially as the Windows Phone stuff has been fading, has been to have a single OS for all their platforms. And because that single OS has part of its family tree is phones and tablet type devices, that of course it supports touch, which is why you can do touch in Windows with Windows 8 that started, and they're up to Windows 10 now. And so they've been changing Windows to be an interface that you can use with a mouse and a keyboard, you can use with a pen, you can use with your fingers. And they've been doing this for a long time, and to varying results. I know some people have the Microsoft Surface, their tablet product, that is basically like, you can use it like a PC with a keyboard attached to it because it's got a hinge thing. You can use it kind of like a tablet. If you're using it like a laptop, you can also just poke your finger at the screen, which I'm sure we've all seen this. Many people just expect to be able to do that, especially younger people, or anyone even who just uses a touch device for a long time. They'll switch from an environment where they're using a tablet or a phone to a laptop and instinctively touch the screen. I know I used to do it with Kindles before the touchscreen Kindles. Because I spent so much time with iPads, I would touch the screen to try to do something on a Kindle, and of course nothing would happen because they were totally inert. Like this is before the touch-sensitive ones. It is natural to get into that habit, and Microsoft has built its entire interface strategy around the idea that all forms of input are welcome, that it should be supported. They've been changing Windows to not require a perfectly precise mouse pointer or even a stylus to do things, to try to make bigger, chunkier controls and gestures and stuff like that. And this Surface Studio is the biggest this has gotten, because previously it was like, you get tablets and you got these convertible laptop-y things that are like a tablet with a keyboard, and of course you can touch the screen, and they have the pen input and all that stuff. But this is like 28 inches is like, this is not a big tablet. This is a full-size, bigger than most people have, because most people do not have 28-inch screens on their PCs. Full-size personal computer running Windows. It doesn't pretend to be a tablet. You can't take it off and carry it like a tablet. It's not a big phone. Like, it is a personal computer that has all the normal input modes you would want, including a pen, but then also accepts not just touch, but like, stop thinking of it as like I'm touching the screen, but more like removing indirection, because the mouse and the keyboard are indirect input devices, and they're wonderful input devices, and they're very precise, and especially the mouse, I feel like, is the least indirect of indirect input devices, because if you've used a mouse for any appreciable amount of time, the indirection disappears very quickly. You don't feel like you're driving the mouse, versus like, say you had a joystick. If you had a joystick, you would feel like you're driving the mouse cursor around the screen like it's a little car to get to the things you want. But if you have a mouse, you just basically feel like you're grabbing things on the screen. And yes, it is indirect, and you're not touching it. It is not as direct as touching the screen, as anyone who uses an iPad or an iPhone knows. It's not that kind of direct. But it is like really good video game controls in that very quickly it disappears, and you stop thinking about the control and just start thinking about the task. But the ultimate direct input is like literal direct input, as in you see something on the screen, you manipulate it on the screen with your hands and your fingers or your pen, like the same way you would in the pre-computer age if you're doing something that involves putting marks on a piece of paper or shuffling things around. Put marks on the piece of paper or shuffle things around. Like, do it. Don't move something that moves another thing on a screen that represents the things you're moving around. Just get right on that screen. And this thing tilting down to like a drafting table type, angle, saying like, if you're not doing text input, you're not writing a program, but instead you're doing anything having to do with visual arts or anything like that, turn it down, set aside your keyboard and your mouse for now, and just get right on there on that screen. It's a huge screen. Just get right on there. You got a pen, you got your fingers, you got the little dialy thing. I can imagine them adding more types of tools to that. That to me is the culmination of their strategy of allowing all forms of input by saying, here's a form of input. Not only do we accept all forms of input, it's like, oh, you can't decide. You should concentrate on one. It's kind of weird to type and then use a mouse, but also touch a screen. Make up your mind. Am I clicking the button with the mouse cursor? Am I touching it with my finger? Am I drawing with a pen? What am I doing? There are many tasks in which directly interacting with a gigantic screen is the best interface. The tasks where you put aside all those other tools and say, I just want to get right to it. And obviously they're showing like art and stuff like that. It's the most obvious one. And this is their first crack at this, so maybe it's not as good as it could be. People have said that there's too much parallax because your pen is too far away from like where the pixels are, and that there's lag in some of the applications. But I really feel like this is almost inevitably the future of digital art. Whether Microsoft is going to be the future of digital art, I don't know. But like, we've gone through the whole thing of using, using mice, to using tablets that are an indirect input device, to the Wacom Cintiq, which is like a tablet that's also the screen. And it's like just keep going, because people love all those tools and they get used to those tools. But direct input, if you can raise a generation with the expectation that you do your artwork on a giant 28-inch monitor by directly manipulating it, that's going to win in the end, whether it's Microsoft or somebody else. And Microsoft getting there first it's nice to see, even if this is a product that is not great, and it should be worrying to Apple, because Apple doesn't have anything to compete with this, like, at all. And I don't think Apple can say, we really believe that the future of doing digital art is using a Cintiq, because Apple doesn't make those either. We really believe the future of art is using a mouse or doing everything on, they have iPads. All right, so where's your 28-inch iPad that you need to plug into the wall? Like, whatever Apple's going to do, I'm not saying they have to make Macs touchscreen or anything, but if they care at all, which maybe they don't, about the creative arts that involve drawing things, even things from, like, I can imagine CAD or architectural drawings, not just fine arts and illustration and stuff like that, they need to be doing something about this. And I was so excited when they came out with the iPad Pro. It was like, yeah, that's what I was talking about. You need a really big iPad. And if you go back to listen to all those shows from years and years ago, I think at some point I did talk about the whole drafting table thing. I think we talked about it on this very podcast, but also on Hypercritical. This is it. Microsoft made it before Apple did. Apple did make their iPad bigger, but they took a long time to do it, and they didn't make it bigger. And the idea of an iPad that you can't take off your desk, I remember being laughed at, perhaps on this show, perhaps on other ones, like, well, what the hell's the point of an iPad if you can't move it anywhere? This is the point. This is the thing. So I am super proud of Microsoft for making this. I hope they keep at it. I hope they don't say, well, not a lot of people bought these, because I guarantee you not a lot of people are going to buy this because it's really expensive and it's like the first generation product. And, truth be told, most people don't do fine arts on their computer, right? But I think this is the right idea for that class of problems. And if Apple cares about that class of problems, if Apple cares about keeping those creatives, and I totally think they should, because they are another branch of sort of the founding bedrock of Apple's products, like creative professionals, they need to start putting the air pump into those iPads and cranking them up pronto, because if they don't, someone else is going to get there first.
Do you have any idea how much I wanted Reebok pumps as a kid? My goodness. I wanted those so bad. I don't know. I really admire this, like you said, John. I also think that this solves a class of problems that I just don't have, which I mean, you kind of said as well. But I have a Slack team that I'm in that's a handful of people that are either current or former employees of my last employer, the consulting gig. And we were I feel like we have very cyclical conversations, and one of them is, our touchscreen device is stupid or not. And since most of these people are Windows developers, most of them have touchscreen Windows laptops, and all of them swear, oh my God, Casey, you have no idea, it's so good. And that very well could be the case. Maybe it is that good. But having used a handful of touchscreen laptops, admittedly very, very briefly, I have yet to really have it click. I've yet to say, oh yeah, this does make sense. And maybe given a fair shot, maybe it would, but I don't feel like I want a touchscreen computer to begin with. And now you're saying, well, why wouldn't you, why not have a touchscreen iMac? If I was an artist, heck yes. But as me, meh, no thanks. It's a cool thing to look at.
But you don't want a touchscreen laptop. Like, when you phrase it that way, like, no. Who wants a touchscreen? I'm just saying people find themselves compelled to touch a screen, but no, like, those things, the Surface, I would say, is not a touchscreen laptop. It is a tablet with a keyboard. Apple makes one of those already. It's called the iPad. The iPad is not a touchscreen laptop. It is a tablet that comes with a keyboard. And you think, like, what's the difference? Well, they're both basically the same in use. Like, they're opened at the same angle. There's a keyboard horizontally and a screen kind of vertically. And yes, you can touch the screen, but you use them in such different ways. Like, oh, well, when I'm just using it with my hands, it's just an iPad. But then when I want to do typing, I use the keyboard. Like, I don't know what you want to call that, but phrasing it as a laptop with a keyboard sounds like, oh, well, I don't want to be poking my finger. It's not comfortable, as Apple's pointed out a million times, to poke at a vertical screen. It's better to use the indirect input devices. But I think that's looking at it the wrong way. It's taking the old thing and saying, I'm taking the old thing and modifying it by adding a touchscreen. when we take the new thing, which is a tablet, and modify it by adding back a keyboard, everyone's okay with it, and it's basically the same result. And this thing, the Surface Studio, I think it's like, this is not a touchscreen laptop. This is also not a touchscreen iMac, because an iMac doesn't lay down on the table for you. Like, there's no way in hell you want a touchscreen iMac. You can't draw on an iMac. The thing only tilts like 15 degrees, and most of them are, it's close to straight up and down the whole time. That is not the Surface Studio. The key feature of the Surface Studio that says, when you want to do the thing, like just like an iPad, when you just want to use it like an iPad, you don't need the keyboard. And the Surface Studio is like, when you want to do stuff that doesn't involve text input at all, like you're drawing a picture and doing architectural drawings, or like manipulating lines or things in space or whatever, and you don't have to use the keyboard, lay the whole thing down. I think like in the pictures, they have it like laying down on top of the keyboard. Like you don't even have to see the keyboard. It's not there anymore. It's like, it's the same way the keyboard goes away when you use your iPad. Like, I'm not using the keyboard part of my iPad now. I'm just using the iPad part of it. And that's in a portable context. This is just simply the desktop equivalent of that. So I'm not sure what you want to call it. And it is weird that Apple's most likely response to this would have to be an iOS device and not a Mac, which is strange because, as we've talked about in the past, Apple's thus far, their inability to really get pro-level applications to flourish on iOS devices, whereas they're still kind of doing okay on the Mac. Like, that's Apple's challenge to solve. But I'm just saying, like, writ large, I've always, the future of computing, direct manipulation for tasks that require it on a big, gigantic, awesome screen. The only way that's not going to happen is if a VR and AR advance to the point where this approach never has its chance to be it never has its day in the sun. Because AR and VR, if they get good enough, make having a big giant thing that lights up in front of you like archaic. But I feel like there will be a time before AR and VR get good where it will be the time of the gigantic touchscreens that lay down in front of you. And when I'm super old and I'm, doing computing stuff that doesn't involve typing, I would like to have a big, gigantic, gorgeous screen lay down in front of me so that I can do stuff on it, and also have a keyboard for when I do text input, and also have speech recognition, and also have a bunch of things like pens and stuff I could do on it. I'm ready for the Microsoft Surface Studio with 20 years in advancement, probably also not made by Microsoft.
One thing you mentioned briefly earlier, John, is like, if they stick with this, and that's because Microsoft, they throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall. They change strategies often, and they change desktop initiatives often. This product line, like many other things Microsoft has tried in recent years, might not be good enough for them. It might not sell well enough, or it might not get enough software support.
It won't sell well enough. But like, don't you see this as a like the trend? Like, they've spent all these years making a single OS that accepts all these kinds of input. Like, that's not like a fluke. That's not like that's what they've been doing. And that's what gives them the option to do things like this. I feel like this, like I said, this is the culmination of years and years and years of work. You can't make this on day one. You have to do all the work to make the unified Windows that does all the kinds of input, to change the Windows UI to even be usable with touch, to make the device that has a pen that, that looks like a laptop with a touch screen. You have to do years and years of that before you can make this thing. So I feel like it's not a fluke. Sticking with it merely means maybe they will retreat from making their own PCs. Like, maybe they will retreat back to the Surface, or retreat back to tablet or phone size things, or get out of that business entirely and just do Microsoft Azure and then license Windows to clone makers. We don't know. But I don't I don't think like they're going to say, oh, actually touching the screen is not a big deal, because they've just spent so long coming to this point. Like, that I feel like they worked hard to be able to produce a machine like this. And this one won't sell well enough to be significant, but I really think they will take a second and a third crack of it. And when I think of the best of Microsoft, I think of, it pains me to say this, I think of the company that made the Xbox, which was a gigantic, ugly piece of crap, but they stuck with it, and every new Xbox they've made has been better than the previous one.
Hey, that first Xbox was a really good system. But no, I mean, like, so
Xbox is huge, LOL.
Yep. No, I think just because they've built in all this capability for things like touch and pen input, if you would have looked at the TV market 5 years ago, you would have thought that 3D TVs were just what everybody wanted, and they were taking off like crazy, and that obviously
nobody ever thought that.
Obviously, the future of TV was going to be 3D, but because if you looked at every TV, every high-end to even mid-range TV you could buy in a store, they were all 3D supported TVs. But in practice, that the reason that feature was being put there was because a stagnant industry was trying to add more hardware things to make people upgrade because they weren't upgrading their TVs fast enough. So Microsoft's been putting in all this crazy capability and stuff into the Surface line, all these different input methods and everything else. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's using them, or that this will be how people will use their Microsoft computers in the future. It might turn out that way, but just because the capability's there, just because Microsoft is building all this, support into everything, is building this hardware, that doesn't mean that PC users are going to meaningfully adopt this. They might, but that's not a foregone conclusion.
No, it's not PC users that are buying this. It is creative professionals specifically, which is a tiny market. And out of those people, they're not going to buy it because this is like you trying to enter a market that another company owns, or like there is already a set way to do things, and you have a totally different way to do it. Some people are going to try it, but professionals are the least likely to change their ways, even if they're already using a Microsoft Windows PC running Photoshop with a tablet, whether it's a Cintiq or just a plain old tablet. Even those people aren't going to buy the Surface Studio except for on a lark or to be curious about it, because they're set in their ways, using their Microsoft Windows PC, running Adobe Photoshop with a tablet. And they've been doing that their whole career, and that's what they like, and maybe they're curious about this, but it's not a big deal. But the thing about the future is, if they stick with it and keep selling this, even though they're not making money on it, because not enough people buy it, eventually, I think the market will come around to it, because people who start out new might be interested in it and try it out, and they never got used to using a non-light up tablet. Or the people who use Cintiqs might view this as a better Cintiq until they try it and realize actually the Cintiq is a little bit better because it's got all these buttons on it they're used to, and so on and so forth. Like, it's going to be a long road. And the other X factor is that people don't like Windows, or Marco doesn't like it anyway. Some people don't like Windows, believe it or not. And so those people who don't like Windows are going to be like, well, this looks great and all, but I don't like Windows, so I'm not going to do that. All the professionals who are using Macs, for example, I use Photoshop on a Mac with the Wacom tablet or whatever. Like, even just talking to, seeing the tweets from Dr. Wave on Twitter, like, isn't this perfect for Pixar? It's like, well, actually at Pixar, people who have these giant tablets to draw on to do their 3D work, they're on like articulated arms, and so it's a non-starter for this thing to just be on a simple hinge that goes on a desk. Like, this is just one product, and that it's not as flexible as the products they're already using, and they already have a system that works. And so this may be novel and interesting, but it doesn't work for Pixar, right? But this is early days. This is a single product from a single company with lots of caveats that are associated with it. So I'm not going to say that this is going to make Microsoft the king of the creative professionals, but they do have a head start on people, and if they keep iterating on this product and this idea and this concept for years and years and years, and keep going with this whole OS strategy with touch, and maybe make Windows a little bit nicer in the process, and no one else does anything, because who else is there? It's not like Linux is going to take over the creative professional market, right? It's them and Apple, basically, at this point. And if Apple doesn't move, it gives Microsoft time to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail over and over again, and eventually they'll get pretty decent, and they'll basically win by default if Apple never makes an iPad bigger than 12.5 inches and never makes a Mac like this.
Thanks so much to our 3 sponsors this week: Betterment, Audible, and Squarespace. And we will see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Do you want to talk about Sal Soghoian? I'm sorry if that's not how you pronounce it. I haven't had time to research. This news broke a couple hours before we started recording that Sal Soghoian, who he was the apparently the product manager the head of macOS automation technologies. So that would include things like AppleScript, Apple Events, Automator, and apparently he has been let go of Apple. His position has been eliminated. So that basically, it sure seems like Apple is no longer going to have a head of automation of apps on macOS, and a lot of longtime Mac users are taking this news to be possibly a pretty bad sign. Do we want to talk about this? I mean, we haven't really had time to look into it much.
I looked into it, and I know Sal from by reputation and by all the WWDC sessions I've seen with him, and I've met him in person a couple of times. Although I'm sure he doesn't remember me, but
I'm pretty sure I have too. He looks very familiar.
Yeah, he's one of those people you recognize. There are a couple aspects of it. One is that Sal is just a very nice, gregarious, charismatic, smart person. He's got charisma. You see him, and especially if you're a nerd and you're like attracted to smart people, right, who are interesting and dynamic and have opinions and can express them well, that's Sal. So people who are longtime Apple fans and who have, known him professionally or by reputation or by his products or presentations are sad to see somebody that everybody liked not be at the company anymore. Right. That's an unquestionable aspect of this entire thing, because if he was a jerk that everybody hated, this would not be as big a story. Right. And then the other part is what you just said about automation on the Mac, which people just shorten to say like, oh, Sal, he's that AppleScript guy. That's a reasonable summary of him if you want to go there, but there's much more to it than that. You can read all the stuff on his website. We'll put a link in the show notes. It's not just AppleScript. There's also shell scripting and Apple events that Apple scripting is based on. And you can do it in all sorts of different languages, and there's the tooling involved with that. Even as recently as like last year or the year before that, they finally added like library/framework support for AppleScript, so you could write AppleScript libraries and use them. Like AppleScript was kind of stuck in amber for a long time, not really getting any better, but not really getting any worse. But was still an essential part of so many professionals' workflows, like that they would use AppleScript to automate the things that they did, and it was important to them for their professional applications they were using to have AppleScript support to be able to do this. Automator in the OS X age was this other thing of like let regular people design sets of actions without having to be programmers. So Automator would let you string together, do this, then do that, then do that, without having to like learn a language, even a language as simple as AppleScript. And his position being eliminated, I don't know enough about the internal rearrangement, but it could just be that like the division is merged with some other division. There was another person that Apple likes better who's heading that division, so he's out and that person is in. But it could also be that, and this would totally fit with Apple's recent moves, as in neglecting the Mac Pro and having difficulty making Pro apps and canning Aperture and all that other stuff, that they see using users creating automations in anything even approaching a programmer-like environment, whether it be HyperCard, rest in peace, or Automator, or writing AppleScript themselves. That is not the future of computing. It's too complicated. Regular people don't want to do it. The professionals who want to do it are really causing more problems to themselves than they're solving, and really they should just allow us to define the workflows by hard-coding them into our applications, or just buy another application that does what they want and stop trying to program it or whatever. Therefore, having an automation division and a product manager of automation, that's not the future of the company. That's not the future of the Mac. We don't need that anymore. It's a waste of time and resources, and it's holding back our other approaches. That's like the doomsday scenario. The most pessimistic scenario is that automation is being de-emphasized in the same way that writing batch scripts would be de-emphasized, or having to write programs yourself would be de-emphasized, right? And it makes some sense. Like the march of progress has been de-emphasizing the need for people who use computers to do stuff like that. It used to be that you had to enter your programs by typing them from the back of a magazine in BASIC, and that's how you got your program to run, right? And no one does that anymore. Now we have the App Store, right? And a lot of the things that we used to use automation for hopefully are mooted by the fact that programs are just better, or the internet does it better, or even something as simple as like, what is the thing for iOS? Workflows?
Yeah, workflow.
Right. It's a third-party opportunity. Workflow is just fine. Apple doesn't need to do it. We just need to provide the capabilities. And Apple Events itself, you can't argue with the fact that Apple Events is pretty damn old and creaky. It could be that it's all being replaced by some bold new vision of automation for the modern age, in the same way that AppleScript replaced everything that came before it. But as with all things in Apple, we don't know. It's a big black hole. We have no idea what they're planning. We just have fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And once again, this is all in the context of Apple fans being grumpy for a bunch of related reasons. So it can feel bad, but I'm not entirely ready to go all doom and gloom on this, just because it could just be that it's time to turn on a new page, because Sal and all the tech that he was working on, and especially the foundational tech like Apple Events, has never really felt like it has fit into the OS X world. So best case scenario, they're rethinking this all and saying, what does automation mean, from here going forward? Does it mean Apple Events, or is there a better overall system for automating things on the computers? In worst case, Tim Cook says, automating things is stupid. We don't need to do that anymore. People should just tap their meaty little fingers on screens and not worry about it.
Yeah, I never really wrote much Apple script. I did real early on when I had first gotten my Mac to do, I don't know, like some silly basic things. I forget exactly what it was for, but it was like maybe setting a default printer or something like that. And this was like in 2008-ish. And I personally have never really gone back and had a need to write more. Now, I know there's tons of people who write it a lot and use it heavily. But for me, this is not something I'm terribly worried about, and not something that I use terribly often. But it also does make me a little bit sad. If this is a canary in a coal mine, in the coal mine for automation in OS or Mac OS, it would bum me out if that went away. But I wouldn't say it would necessarily affect my day to day either. I
mean, it's more about like it's a very, very powerful set of features. AppleScript, the language is kind of, that's just the implementation detail of it. But the system on which it's based that exposes Apple events and control of applications, automation of other applications, through this entire API that can be any language you need it to be. And there's many things that expose it as different languages, like I think JS Talk makes it JavaScript, and I think there's a few other things like that. It's more this. That feature set, while it is used by probably a very tiny percentage of Mac users, the amount of power it gives is so great that this really Mac OS. One of the things I love so much about Mac OS is that it is just so incredibly powerful. I mean that deeply. Like, it is incredibly powerful if you know how to use its power. Like, it is in every sense of the word a true workstation OS. As I said in my Mac Pro post, like, OS X is awesome, and to remove or to let rot or to deprecate a major area of power from it, I can see why people are worried about that. And John, I agree. It does seem like things are moving away from that, from that direction in consumer software design, mostly by Apple's doing, by the way. So it's not like the whole industry doing this, mostly Apple doing this. But it was in many ways theirs to lose. They really had amazing automation features that were fairly accessible to people. Like, programmers will always find ways to automate things. The most extreme power users will always find ways to automate things. But one of the things that made this area of OS X so powerful is that it was really quite accessible to lots of people. A whole lot of people who are not programmers were able to use things like Automator to automate really time-consuming tasks that then freed them up to have the computer do what computers are supposed to do. The kind of power that usually you have to be a programmer to have. Many people were given this power by this system and this infrastructure. So the loss of it, I think, is certainly cause for concern if you love the Mac operating system as much as I do for this power that it's always had. And as I said, like, I'll be fine because I'm a programmer. I can use Bash and script something up, or actually write an app to do things if I need to automate them, which I do all the time. I hardly ever use these technologies because I usually just write shell scripts and stuff instead. But a lot of people use these, I think. And even, again, percentage-wise, I'm sure it's very small. But that still could be like thousands of people who rely on this to save them like hours of time a week, or to do something that would just be impractical to do otherwise. So, yeah, I feel the worry on this. That being said, there's a lot about this that we still don't know. All we know is that this guy his job was cut. Apparently, we don't know why. We don't know. Maybe they're just reorganizing the department of whatever it's in. I don't know how this is organized inside. Maybe it's just a reorg. Maybe it's like weird cost cutting measures that maybe they might come back to later. Who knows? Maybe it was just like a personal conflict.
Maybe there's a new team doing basically like maybe all of a sudden there's overlap because
right.
We have this automation system, but maybe the Swift people are like, oh, I totally want you to be able to script your applications with Swift, and we have this project, and then maybe that project wins, and so this will be the legacy version of automation, and then the Swift one will come. Another one I was thinking about in terms of how do you get people who can't program to be able to do simple automation stuff. I always feel like the people who are good at using Automator and AppleScript are either basically programmers already and they don't know it, or could be programmers within 15 minutes. Because to use, even though Automator is way easier than coding, the people who use it as part of their job, they eventually can't avoid basically becoming programmers. They don't know they're programmers. They think they just click buttons, but they're learning conditionals, loops, logic, input, output. Like, they're just learning what programmers would consider to be an awful programming language, was just clicking a bunch of buttons around, right? Which is like, let me just write the code, right? But that's
see also Excel wizards.
Yeah, exactly, right? But another way you could do that is how do you get non-programmers to be able to make their computer to do busy work that programmers know how to make them do? Another way to do it would be to have a conversation with the computer and describe what you want to have the computer do it. So a much, 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 much more advanced Siri. You could say, Siri, let's have a discussion. I want you to take all the when photos arrive in this folder, I want you to take all of them
Siri, let's have a
and
discussion.
rename them.
Yeah.
Rename them with the date and tag them with this label and put them into this folder or something. Something you could do with Hazel or with Automator, or resize them all to be this size or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Siri would go back and forth. Do you mean like this? Giving you a preview of what you were going to say. Okay, if I was to do it, this is what I would do. Does this look like what you wanted? Like, all it would be doing behind the scenes is using the automation machinery that's already there, and all of the automation you're able to do for, like, images easy because they have so many tools for, like, resizing images or changing the EXIF data or renaming files. Like, that's all easy to do. All you need to do is figure out a way to express to the computer what you want. And if you can have a conversation with even a pretty stupid Siri that is nevertheless hundreds of times smarter than it is now, to go back and forth, eventually Siri could figure out, essentially, here's the Automator action you would have built, only we built it together by having a conversation. That is certainly a much more advanced, much brighter, and I think attainable future of letting normal people automate stuff. So for all we know, maybe the future automation is all wrapped up in the Siri team, and they have grand plans to do that. I wish them luck, because so far they haven't really shown me anything, but it could be done. And so maybe, like you said, we don't know what's going on at Apple. It could just be a reorg. It could just be a merging type thing. But I have hope that even if Apple has decided that every single technology that Sal lists on his website is the past of automation, that I have some hope that Apple believes that there is something else that is the future of automation. Because like you said, Marco, people want to use their computers to do complicated things. But if they're not programmers and don't want to become programmers, that we have to find a way to let them do that, like a gentler slope to get them to be able to do that, because they will be happier with their computers and will find them more indispensable, even if they could perform something as simple as, when I get an email like this, extract the image attachment, put it in this folder, rename it this way, and then send me a text message about it or do whatever. Like, when you show normal people that they can make something like that work, they think it is the greatest thing in the world, because they're basically like, as someone said in the chat room, it's like the gateway drug to programming, only they never actually go through the gate. They just stay outside of it and go, this is great. My computer does what I want, which I think is great. So I think there's still need for non-programmers to be able to automate things in their computer, but I'm willing to believe that there is a better way.